You're listening to the ADHD Heroes Podcast, a podcast where we speak with the heroes of the ADHD community, namely educators, mental health professionals, and of course, those with ADHD themselves, to gain insights, tools, and most importantly, inspiration towards succeeding and thriving with ADHD. I'm your host, Rabbi Shmuel Reich, a high school Rebbe and an ADHD coach in private practice. Welcome to the show. Hi there. On this week's episode of the podcast, I spoke with Rabbi Dovid Goldman, the former principal of Yeshiva Tiferes Yisroel of Brooklyn, and presently principal of Heichal Hatorah in Teaneck, New Jersey. We discussed the fact that Rabbi Goldman's father was a psychologist who may have been able to give insight to his rabbeim as to how to help him better. Rabbi Goldman's challenges in a classroom as a kid, while being unusually bright, and he was able to graduate elementary school at age 12 and high school at age 15. How more independent study post-high school really gave him an opportunity to grow. How seeing his students and kids taught him more about himself. How his own experience helped him realize what kids with ADHD need. Avoiding lowering expectations. Calibrating a classroom to match the energy of kids with ADHD. The value of understanding oneself, both their strengths and their weaknesses. ADHD strengths, suggestions for making a classroom better suited for kids with ADHD, strategies he uses himself, he uses for himself, and a lot more. Enjoy. Rabbi Dovid Goldman, welcome to ADHD Heroes Podcast. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me. A pleasure to be here.
Okay, so first, a little bit about yourself and your background.
Okay, I'll start in the beginning.
Very fine place to start.
Yes, grew up in a house of 8 siblings. I'm one of 8. My father started his life in the world of academia when not with a poor yeshiva background. In fact, no yeshiva background. Didn't know much about what a Torah education looked like, but he kind of knew that he wanted one. But he just didn't have one, went to public school. And to him, my grandfather, that house was a highly academic environment. My grandfather was a wonderful, wonderful tzaddik of a man, and his life was dedicated to helping people. But he didn't know much about Torah. He was a big doctor. And in that house, my father grew up wanting to grow in the world of the Ivy League world. And he went to Harvard University at a young age, and was a tenured professor as a young man.
Wow.
About 27. He went, and then at some point he found Torah. When he found Torah, he then gave up everything and learned in yeshiva for the next 55 years or so. And during that time, he kind of fused. He was a clinical psychologist in the evenings, and he kind of fused the world of Torah and the world of psychology, or at least understood the Torah in a particular fashion based on his understanding of psychology. But that was the house that I grew up in, and my older brothers, I have two brothers older than me. My older brothers kind of blazed the path of Torah ahead of me. As a kid, I didn't understand much about what was going on in front of me, other than the fun that was going on in my house and understanding what the priorities of the house were. But as a kid, I didn't really understand, like, studying myself. I didn't really understand myself, like, what my kochos were, what my challenges were. And then somehow I found myself in Beis Medrash at a young age. I graduated high school, or they sent me out of high school. They got me a diploma, sent me out of high school when I was barely 15. And then went to Beis Medrash, learned in Beis Medrash for the next 12 years or so, and 13 years, and then I was a Rebbe. First I was a Rebbe in Chofetz Chaim in Queens, and then I was a menahel in St. Louis High School for 7 years, and then in Chofetz Chaim in Brooklyn for 7 years, and now I have the wonderful opportunity to be in Heichal Hatorah in Teaneck.
Wow. That's a story. So when I was a kid, I'm 40 now, people did not know a lot about ADHD, and you're a little older than me. So at what point did ADHD come on the radar screen for you? Were you still learning then? Were you teaching then? And what did that look like?
I'll tell you the truth. As a kid, my father was always a psychologist. He didn't really talk about psychology in the home, but I guess it came to us, and we understood things. Perhaps just a focus on accepting people and understanding their challenges was in the house, and there's just an awareness and a studying of people that happen, and with that, it comes a studying of myself. But certainly, to understand ADHD, the words, I think they were known even when I was a kid in high school. We didn't really know how prevalent it was, and I certainly didn't attach that to myself. When I was in third grade, I remember my father took me to somebody. I think in hindsight, I guess he was a psychiatrist, and then put me on medicine. But I didn't have a clue what that was. What that was.
Right, what year are we
Like
talking?
third grade, about 1990,
I think okay.
maybe 91, early 90s. So they put me on medication. I didn't like it. To be honest, I probably never took it. And I didn't want this thing. Like, I don't want to be on medicine. I never understood it. However, I kind of understood the way in my mind, I understood it was that some people had energy. Some people had high energy. And in a way, it was bothersome, but I felt blessed to have it. And I was lucky to have teachers in some of the grades. Fifth grade, I had a Rabbi Lisker who used to let me stand in the back of the classroom. Everyone else had to sit in their desk, but I was allowed to stand in the back of the classroom. I didn't really understand why, but I kind of knew I have energy. Um, and then sixth grade, and my next year, eighth grade, I kind of also, the Rebbeim had this like understanding and allowance for me. And I never really understood why. And I think in hindsight, what must have happened is that my father must have explained to them that, hey, give him some space. But I didn't understand what was going on around me. And I didn't understand what was happening to me. I just, okay, I have a lot of energy. And at the same time, also parts of school were super annoying.
Right.
And
Well, what worked well? What was harder? What went well?
so boring classes were impossible for me.
Right.
Um, I felt like, and I didn't know, I blamed that on myself that for some reason I just can't understand things in this class. I looked at myself, I didn't realize, you know, I thought of myself as, maybe, okay, so I'm not the smartest guy, like, cause I can't do well in this class. Looking inside text while sitting in the class was impossible. But then somehow they graduated me to high school when I was 12. And I was like, wait, that's weird. It was just confusing. Like, here I am, like, I can't sit through a class, and there's some classes that are just like boring, and other people know the answers, and they do all their homework, and I never have a pen, and I never have my stuff, but they graduated me. That's weird. And then like isolated times, I remember in ninth grade there was a science test, and I got like a 98 on the test, and the teacher accused me of cheating and sent me to the principal. And the principal laughed and said, "No, there's no way he didn't cheat." And the question, why do you assume I cheated? Because until that time, like I didn't get good grades in science. And what was the answer? Somehow this topic it piqued my curiosity, and I was interested in it. And I studied it, and I did well. But I didn't have an understanding like why that was, like why I did well in some places and not others. So it just an awareness of ADHD for myself was certainly very low, and really there was very little talk about it. So
Right.
I think this was happening. I was lucky. I was fortunate that that some people around me understood and at least did like a very basic um, accommodations for me. But there certainly was very little awareness about it.
Right. Wow. So at which point did it? Were you hearing the term ADHD around more commonly?
So I went, I guess, just for myself in high school, I certainly didn't hear it. It's an amazing thing. Back in the day, like I think back to my high school, I was in high school for 3 years. I think I was in the principal's office three times, twice because I was in trouble, and once when when the menahel suggested that I graduate early and I skipped 12th grade. There was no discussion with kids, or at least from my experience, about themselves and teaching them about like self awareness. It was you either got in trouble, or if you were lucky, you had a rebbe, a teacher, a principal who was nice and was let you off things. But to give you an awareness and to help you understand yourself, there was very little of that, at least in myself and in my friend group and anywhere I was in camp and school. Like there was very little understanding of self, and it could be that the teachers understood. It could be, my guess is they probably didn't understand themselves. But so there was very little talk. You used the words, like people used the words ADD, but that was like the weird, like okay, like there's some kind of weird guy has ADD, but it wasn't like a normal thing. And then I went to Beis Medrash, and again there was no talk about anything, as studying ourselves as students. I somehow then did right when the first day I went to Beis Medrash, like I took off, and I was, thank God, I was very much liach, and I didn't understand why. I thought it's just because, oh, now I care. I didn't have an understanding of how ADD affected the difference between my schooling until then and after that. So I never thought about it again because, like, I was in Beis Medrash and I was rolling, and it only really came up again as a Rebbe and seeing it in students and then learning and then trying to understand it and studying it and reading about it. So that would have been much later. That would have been 12, 13 years later, and then probably already 2007 type. And then I was blessed, like in my house, my wife is very emotionally attuned and is very understanding of these type of things. And together we kind of embarked on a journey of understanding these things and to try to for me to help my students, but and then ultimately really help my kids. And the truth is that when I saw it in my kids, that was the best motivation. When I saw it in my students, I was motivated to help them and to work with them. But then when I saw it in my kids, it was even more. And then really from seeing it in my kids, then I understood myself better. I like started to see myself in my kids. And then I was like, wait a second. I get it. I understand them and I understand myself.
What were some, I guess, light bulbs that you had? I mean, things that it began to explain.
So an example, like as a Rebbe, so I saw myself, okay, I have these kids who they're high energy. I saw I couldn't sit down as a Rebbe. I'm bouncing off the walls and I'm high energy, on fire with passion and excitement and excited about the learning. And I saw that I was able to reach them and be able to reach kids who are like that and high energy kids where in other classes they weren't. And then I started to see and then I started to see that it's not only like that. There's some negatives about the way that I teach too. Like there were some kids who had a hard time with my energy. For the most part, I felt like, what do you mean? I can educate anybody. I can inspire a whole class. I'm like, look, I can inspire all these kids. And I started to realize that, some kids do better in a different environment, in a calmer classroom, in a more structured, organized classroom. And then I started to think about myself and what is it about me and what is it about my classroom and what is it about these kids and what do they need. So that was one light bulb. A second thing, which I think is super powerful, is that people started to come in general in the world of education. Oftentimes, people crank about our generation, and people will call our generation ADHD generation, a microwave generation, a generation that the quick soundbite, the quick slide that I can only pay attention for a few seconds. It's impossible to teach them or to inspire them. And I think part of it, I was a little bit hurt for the kids. Like here I am, I see these kids, they're great kids, but then I think deeper that it wasn't the reality I was living with. Like here, people are complaining about these kids, and I see these kids are like super interested, and you can reach them. And then it hit me that what? In many ways, our generation is much more intrigued and intellectually curious. As an example, I'm thinking back to when I was a kid in high school. Nobody would voluntarily go to like an extra schmooze. No one would subjugate themselves to listen on their own time to like an inspirational schmooze. Yet the kids in front of us, the kids in high school, the kids in front of us, voluntarily they're listening to they're ingesting, they're taking in tons and tons of inspirational stuff. Everyone's listening to inspirational quotes, inspirational quick hits. Everyone's listening to extra schmooze, and there's tons of stuff that they're listening on in their own way. They're being reached in their own way. And what I noticed is that it's not true that our generation, that the kids don't want to be inspired. They're thirsting for it. They're craving it, but it needs to talk to them in their language and what hits them. And I realized that the ADHD kid is super like that. The ADHD kid or the ADHD adult, they need a feeling of immediacy. They need a feeling of purpose. if you tell them to study, if you tell an ADHD kid to study for a test that's in 2 weeks, it's irrelevant. It doesn't even exist. It's not on the radar. You tell them that they need to study something that has no meaning in their life, it's irrelevant, which is super frustrating for many adults. But the flip side of that is that when they what they do is that they crave meaning, and they're craving that inspiration. They're craving the drive. They're craving the being moved, because they don't. That's their whole life. If they're not feeling moved, they feel dead. So they're craving it. It just needs to be in. We as educators have to be able to really study ourselves. What I started to realize in a deeper way is like the world of mitzvos anashim u'lemada, the world of where people struggle with finding meaning in Yiddishkeit and finding meaning in their avodas Hashem. For the ADHD kid, they have an opposite thing. Because of the ADHD, it forces them to look deeper, to find meaning, and they are finding, and they're finding passion. It's on us as educators. If we're not finding them, if we're not inspiring them, we can look at it and say, hey, these kids can't concentrate. Or we can be humble enough to say, what can I do to reach them? What can I do? What can I do to inspire them? Why is it that someone else's class, in a way, it's like it causes us, it forces us to look into like the like a little bit of kinesophrym, and it's tar b'chachma, that when you see what else works and what does work for other educators, for other people, it forces us to become better rebbeim. And the truth is that with the world out, it used to be that when we were in our own classroom, if we couldn't inspire a kid, it was easy to blame the kid. This kid doesn't want to learn. But now that kids have access to tons of stuff, they see rebbeim that do work for them, and it puts a responsibility on us. So some of the light bulbs, I guess, to put it in to make it smaller, some of the light bulbs is learning about the ADHD kid, what works for them, learning about the putting in own and being inspired by them, and putting and instead of giving up on them, and instead of saying that if they're not being reached that they're out, just the opposite, like what to put the focus on us. What can we do to reach them?
So, what were some things that you started to employ when you had this realization? What were things you tried to do differently?
So first of all, understanding that in kids is putting them in position that they can, like, match. Number one thing is that they have to be in classrooms where the energy matches and the style of the teacher matches them, which is obviously you can't do that all the time. I'll tell you a quick story I had with one of my kids did really well with some years of elementary school, and some of my kids, and not as well in other years. And the next year was coming up, and there was an open Rebbe slot, and they were interviewing different Rebbeim. So my wife chanced upon the Rosh Hashiva, and they were schmoozing about this. And my wife said to the Rosh Hashiva, "Can you do me a favor? When you hire a new Rebbe, can you hire a Rebbe who has ADD?" And the Rosh Hashiva looks at him and looks at my wife and says, "Oh, what are you saying?" Like, in his mind, you basically just asked me, like, hire a Rebbe with a disability. That's like crazy. So
It's one for
my
the
wife
highlight
says, "No,
reel.
I don't mean anything." What?
It's one for the highlight reel. That question.
Yeah. So my wife says to the Rosh Hashiva, she says to him that, "No, I don't mean anything. I just mean like Rabbi so and so and Rabbi so and so,
Right.
Rebbeim in elementary school that my son had and thrived in their classes." So now the Rosh Hashiva was totally shocked, because my wife basically just came in, and not only did she ask for an ADD Rebbe, she just called two of his Rebbeim ADD. So the Rosh Hashiva said to her, I wouldn't say that they have ADD. So my wife said, no, I'm not saying that. They said that. They said that they have ADD, and that really works for my son. Like, what they do really works for my son. And these are two phenomenal Rebbeim who are, like, everyone knows are like so fun and so geschmack and so relatable. And the conversation ended. They did not hire a Rebbe with ADD. It was a disaster year.
Oh
But
gosh.
so in terms of so the number one thing is really matching up, putting them in position where there's a Rebbe that matches their vibe, that matches their energy. Part of that is also understanding what is it that the kid needs. So some of that is that the ADD kid does not need to not to look down and say the ADD kid can't. Very often we look at the ADD kid and we just lower the bar. And the truth is, like, thinking to myself as a kid, like, how if my father were to lower the bar and says he's having a hard time in school, I don't know what would have happened to me academically. My father didn't look at me like that. He understood. No, no, this is a kid who actually could do really, really well. So number one, not lowering the bar. Number two, finding them and putting them in the right with the right Rebbe that reaches them. And then some of the things that work with the right Rebbe is that the ADD kid, it's not that he can't concentrate. He can concentrate. He often can uber concentrate.
Hyper focus.
So yeah, hyper focus. He does that on things that he's interested in, and that's not a negative. That's a type. So look at it instead of a disability, to look at it as a type. So harnessing that. An example: I'm learning with a group of high energy guys, and I'm having like, okay, guys, you ready? We're gonna do something crazy right now. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna have a great break at that time, but until then, we're gonna do such power. We're about to cover like thinking with the group was Swiss Night, and these were older guys, like older high school guys, and the first year base managers guys, and they were like high energy guys. And I was like, okay, you know what we're gonna do? We are going to we're gonna do 2 nights. We're gonna finish the whole Maseches Makkos in 2 nights. That's it. We're going straight. We're not moving an inch. We got our power drinks, load them up. We're not moving. We're gonna go straight. We're gonna knock out nobody's here. We're going through the whole Makkos in 2 nights, and we did it.
Right.
And then the next year, these guys, they were in such a high, like, come back. Then we did the whole Elam Mitzias that night, the next year. The whole Elam Mitzias. Now, the whole Shavuos night is not that long, but with power energy and power focus and smart kids. So harnessing that hyper focusing ability was huge. That is a huge thing with them. Then also, the biggest thing I think is awareness. Is awareness for the kids, working with, talking to them about themselves. Like, I remember reading in there's a lot of written material now on ADD. One of the first things that I had written was a series, Driven to Distraction. I forgot the author's name.
Edward
And
Howell. Ned Howell.
yes, and he wrote in the beginning of the book. It was a list. It was like in the Hakdama. It was basically saying like, this is a book for ADD guys, written in ADD style. And like, I love that. It was like, I'm gonna write. You're gonna do something hard. You're gonna read a book here, but you're gonna do it in your way. And then he went and wrote a list of things which are challenges for ADD guys, but also a list of things, qualities, positive things that ADD guys have. And to me, it was eye opening, and it's something which I think is hugely important to teach to the kids, is help them understand themselves, help them understand why it is that they have these different challenges that they have, but within the context of that, this is not a negative, this is a type. This is, you're human. Hashem made Partzufein and Domazulazu. Everyone's faces are different. Everyone's person is different. Everyone's insides are different. The way we learn is different. The way we understand things is different, and the way we're going to relate to Hashem is going to be different. And this is actually, as my daughter once told the teacher, something she was talking about ADD, and she says to her, she's like, that ADD is my superpower. It's like, if we can educate the kids, both sides, to accept the things that are hard for them, but more to empower them with the things that are actually easier for them, and empower them to harness their strengths, to use those strengths.
What are some strengths you see in the school setting? I mean, some of the strengths are obvious, not in the classroom setting, but
Right. So right
right.
off the bat, that's also really important, is to explain. Unfortunately, we live in a world where kids equate success in life with school, and specifically they equate success in their Yiddishkeit with school. And really, school is like, it's a place of education. And listen, I've been working in schools my whole life. I've been a principal for 15 years, but I'm the first one to say schools are the worst places of education that exist in the world. They happen to be right now the best of the options, but that's not the way Hashem gave the Torah. Hashem gave us the Torah that we should learn that we should each have our own school, each learning with someone who understands us, and learning with our own style, one on one. Unfortunately, in the society, in the realities of nowadays, we can't. But that's a very important thing for kids to understand. That's for sure for an ADHD kid. Most schools are not built. I actually, a passion that I have, I would love to have a school for ADD kids. In our culture, it's unfortunately really hard, because if you start a school dedicated to ADD kids, you're going to get kids who just don't fit into the other schools, are not successful. By that time, they're already had a bunch of bumps and bruises. And in theory, if you had a school catered specifically to ADD kids, the kids who are, not that they can't learn, kids who can learn really well. I would want the school to learn not less, For them, they can learn. It's not a lower standard school; it's just a different type. So I think that in a regular school setting, it's very hard for them to shine. Most people don't understand them. We're still stuck in in the what success looks like for everyone else. And there's realities. You have 20 kids in a classroom. You have 25 kids in a classroom. It's really hard to cater to that ADD kid, especially if the other kids are not ADD. But things that kids can shine. First of all, the ADD kid is usually coming along with being impulsive is also very creative. He's very imaginative. He's often out of the box thinker. He can be high energy and be driven. I think we talk a lot about what the biggest challenge in this generation is. I would put up with the biggest of them is apathy. It's just people are apathetic, whereas back in the day, people were driven with all kinds of things and all kinds of drives that they would want, and good, bad, or in between. But people had missions and they were, believed in something. The typical teenager now struggles with just being apathetic and like not caring. The ADD kid doesn't have that to the same degree. They have care, they have interest. They might feel burnt, and they might have given up on themselves because they haven't found their path to success. But the ADD kid is very often very interested, and easily you can engage him. You have to engage him in his way. You have to engage him with a quick hit. You have to engage him with he's looking for meaning, can find meaning. So that's some of the things. If you can find things that are interesting, of interest to him, you can find meaning to him. You can engage him and get him rolling.
So are there nice examples you can think of where you were able to find strengths that they had and harness them in the classroom?
In the class, so first of all, to walk into getting them to engage, getting them to talk, getting them to be to have an ADD kid sit and just listen. Lessons that if you can walk in and try to give a very frontal lesson, the kid is out. If you get the kid to be, and this is true always, if the share is interactive, getting the kid an opportunity to ask, and the kid an opportunity to challenge, to talk, that's huge. And that's not an example. That's just a data an everyday thing. Having the kid having the kid be part of the learning process, huge. Getting him being able to find ADD kid, also not all of them, but very often have a hard time being told a specific path. Like as an example, I think that to me, base medrash, one of the benefits of base medrash, and often I think ADD gets, I don't know if it gets better or it gets covered up, some combination of both. If there's when someone has a little bit more mashli b'chafi, it's like when they have the skills to find the sugya themselves, the ADD kid flourishes much more. When they're told, learn this Rashi, translate like this, read this word, very hard.
It's a little more
If they
freedom.
have, yes, more freedom to freedom, not just to do less, but freedom to find the more, freedom to find, like if you're sitting in a classroom, typical thing happens. You're in the teacher walks in, has a very clear lesson plan. The principal expects a very clear lesson plan. Teacher walks in, today you will learn, and and this is what you will learn. This is how you will learn. These are the marmakomas you're going to use to learn. This is exactly what happens. ADD kid you piqued his interest. He comes in and he has a question. The teacher is thrown off because they had a box. This is out of the box. You just asked me a question. It's a good question. Ruvain, excellent question. We're not talking about that today. We're talking about something else. Now he's gone. You had his interest. He was interested. Now he's gone. Flexibility of a teacher. If you have a teacher, you're learning something. If you come in as a Rebbe and you're learning something, and you're learning a sugya. You start the beginning of the sugya, and a kid is interested. If you have the flexibility to explore what has piqued their interest and to go in that, the more you can do that, right, it's certainly a big win.
At which point did you hear more of the conversation among other teachers and principals to include ADHD in the conversation?
Unfortunately, most of the discussion that I hear from educators about ADHD is with frustration, and it's an explanation of why the kid can't be reached, and it's viewed as negative. And okay, we got to just get him on medicine, which I'm not against medicine. I'll tell you a great story. One of my seventh grader comes home one day, and he says, "Daddy, do you think that he's having a hard time sitting in school?" And he's like, "Daddy, do you think it would help if I was on medicine?" I said, "Maybe." I said, "Do you want to look into that?" He's like, "Yeah." Take him. He loves it. He loved taking his medicine. He's like, "Wow, amazing." This makes my life much easier. Now, it's annoying kids that when they hit teenage years, then they often get thrown off by they're so worried about their social standing and it affects them socially. They think and all kinds of different things and appetite and there's all kinds of things. I'm not against the medicine. If it can be used in the right correctly monitored and with understanding a kid's personality and helping them love themselves and their personality, etc. But usually in the educational world, the talk of ADD is just I can't deal with this kid. He's getting in my way of my lesson. At worst, at best, he's not being successful because of ADD. Let's get him on medicine and drug him back into submission.
Right. Well, that's a shame. I feel like there has been an increased awareness, and like when I try to put stuff out there, I found that people have become more and more receptive. Are you finding that, or no?
I find that there's awareness, but just as to understand why they're having a hard time, but not looking at it as not seeing. Um, Meaning, there's awareness in the fact that people have accepted it. Some will be therefore be willing to take medicine, but not so much beyond that. Of understanding, of therefore understanding. They'll in some environments, in some cultures, they'll be very willing to admit ADD in order to get testing accommodations, to get like those kinds of things, and at best, the environment will be one where people won't be judged for those getting those accommodations, and they'll be okay with that. But to really understand it, and to understand it as not take the kid and say, okay, therefore he can't do much, but to say that no, just the opposite. This guy could. What's an amazing thing I find is that I think that most of the really impactful rebbeim. I'll tell you an interesting thing. I thought from the time I was little, people did observe one thing. They observed that a lot of times, some of the best rebbeim or influencers were people who either A, when they were kids, had a hard time, or B, their own kids have a hard time in school. People know that for years. And I was thinking about that at some point recently. And of course, okay, you have Rabbi Son syndrome, and everyone thinks about that. But there's a much more, to me, it's a very simple thing. You know why? Because most of the really powerful influencers are some level ADD. And therefore, because of their ADD, therefore they're interesting, therefore they're engaging, therefore they're they're high energy, and that's why they're really, really powerful influencers and really powerful rebbeim. And guess what? Those skills that they have, it's not despite the fact that they're a good rebbe or powerful or a big rabbi or a powerful influencer or even a big Talmud Chacham, because his ADD interest drove him that he really wants to know tons and really wants to become a big Talmud Chacham. It's not despite those abilities that he struggled in school. It's because of those abilities that he struggled in school. It's because he's a high energy and an energetic and lively guy. Yeah, schools don't line up. And what struck me is it's a crazy thing is that a lot of times our schools, and for sure our Batim Midrashim, are built with an eye on developing people who, yes, will become big Talmidei Chacham, but also people who are going to become big Rebbeim and big impactful people. There's a problem when the system that's built to create really successful people in that arena is actually hard and difficult for people who are going to become very good in that arena. So yeah, I think that part of that, I think that's why a lot of times those people struggled with when they were kids, and that's why a lot of times their kids are also, because guess what, the kid of the guy who's a really energetic, high lively guy, he probably also has ADD, and therefore also struggles in school. So I don't know if it's the whole answer, but it's a piece to think about.
Right. Do you ever find, as principal, are you coaching teachers through this? And if so, what does that look
Yeah.
like?
Yes, coaching teachers. To be honest, I spend more time coaching kids than teachers. Perhaps that's because kids are much more receptive, and teachers have a really hard job. Teachers are the best. Rebbeim are the best. They give up their life for this, but it's very hard to retrain people, and it's very hard to. At best, what you can do is you can kind of have people respect and appreciate people's differences. That would be a goal. The biggest thing with teachers and rebbeim is to create a culture, not about ADD specifically, but in general, a culture which is accepting of people who are different. And I don't mean different less than. I mean different that we're all different. A culture where people are okay to be themselves, where people are allowed to be human, And if you create a culture like that, so then forget the kids, the adults feel safe. And to be honest, that's really the first step in creating a healthy family environment is when you have a family where you have two parents who feel safe with each other, who accept each other despite their differences, who love each other because of who they are. That creates a healthy home, and the kids who come from that home and the kids who are living in that home will feel safe too. The first step in having a kid feel safe is to have the adults in the house feel safe. And the same thing I think is with school, is that the biggest thing with school is not anything specific technique or trick you're going to teach a particular teacher or Rebbe. If you could create with the adults around an environment of acceptance and respect for people for who they are, so then that's the kids are going to feel safe because just like so and so, just like Rabbi so and so and Mister So and so and Doctor So and so are allowed to be who they are, I can be who I am. And then the teachers themselves will also accept the kids for who they are. If there's an environment where like there's a certain thing that's the spitz, and everyone knows that, there's, first of all, if the adults themselves are kind of, okay, this is the spitz guy, or this is what you should be, and this guy's a little like this, and this one's a little like this. So the whole environment is like one where there's like the perfect being or the perfect type. So then every kid is thinking, am I that type? Is my shear that type? If I can't learn, if there's a specific model citizen in this school, well, maybe I'm not that model citizen. So that overall, I think, is the most important. Once you have that, so ADD is just one of the many examples of different types that will be accepted and respected. So that's kind of like the working with, like once you have that environment that people are different, then people naturally will be inquisitive of like, how do I understand this difference? How do I understand this one's difference?
Right. So I work with teenagers too, and I find sometimes they're receptive and sometimes they're very not receptive. But it sounds like sounds like you're doing great with this. So is there
Okay,
anything in
this is okay.
particular? Okay, good.
I'm being super positive, of course, and obviously that you're never going to be, and you're never going to be 100% successful, and also you have to be humble enough to know that you can. We often talk about in schooling of like we can't kick a kid out, and we have to, and that's the worst thing in the world. And there's truth to that too, but there's also truth to the fact that schools have to be humble enough to know who they can reach, and a lot of times to different kids, you're not by believing that the kid needs to be by you, and if he's not in your school, he's going to fall apart. That doesn't necessarily come from a feeling of kindness. It could come from a feeling of just over a bigger picture of yourself in your school than is real. Different environments are different, and a lot of times when we're not successful for a kid, a lot of times there's a reason. And the reason that we can not successful with this kid is it's not the environment. And maybe I could wish that I had that environment, but I don't. So the kid who's ADD, who can't be reached, yeah, you know what? If the culture in your school is one where you don't have the resources to reach that kid, you don't have the Rebbe to reach that kid. I walk into classrooms now as an adult, and I walk into classrooms there's nothing in the education that is, it's like hard. But I walk into classrooms now and I feel like if I was a kid, I could never sit in a classroom. And the truth is, there's many adults. I'll tell you a story. I remember I walked into a meeting, a Torah meeting with a bunch of Rebbeim. There were probably 150 Rebbeim in the room, and we were there the whole day. And there was food accessible the entire day in the back of the classroom, in the back of the room. And throughout the day, the Rebbeim would walk back and forth during the meetings, back and forth to get food. And I was thinking, like, the Rebbeim can't sit in class. They certainly cannot eat in class, and that's not a knock. You know what? They're probably amazing. But if I was designing a classroom for this energetic, lively Rebbe, yeah, he should have to be able to move and sit and go get food, and that's so. Like I think that we have to be humble enough to feel. I feel myself. If I just yesterday I walked around. In my school I have 15 Ian Shur, and yesterday I was walking observing different classrooms. So I was in 12 out of the 15 classrooms yesterday, and I was walking through them, and I really realized that, you know what, it's interesting. Some of the higher shurim in my yeshiva by me, I would not be able to right now. I wouldn't be able to be successful in, and some of the next level shurim I would, because the higher shurim were less energetic and they were more academic, and the kid was sitting in their seat and writing notes, and the second shur was lively and lebedik and everyone was into it. So if you have a yeshiva which can't cater to that kid, you have to be humble enough to say, you know what, that might be my yeshiva can't, or maybe I can't. If I don't have the ability, if I as a Rebbe, if I can't reach this kid, and you know what, that's fine. You're not everyone could reach everyone, and not every sometimes, and this is only one reason. There's many reasons why we cannot. What we can do, all of us can do, is we could love the kid and care about the kid, and then help them find a place where they could be, where they can be comfortable and can be successful.
Are there things that you wish you could do, but you feel like there would be too much pushback or social response?
Right off the bat, one of the things that I feel like I would hold back, I would love to have a school, or there should be a school in Klal Yisrael, which is catered really to needs of ADD kids. Right now, what we have if you're lucky, in a good school, you'll have two levels of shiur, or two, and they're usually levels, where the highest shiur is the kids who could be successful in a box classroom, and the other shiur is a motley group of people, and the tzad hashava in that group is anyone who can't be successful in the highest shiur. Why can't they be? It could be because academically they can't be successful. It could be because they have a learning difference. It could be because they have ADD and they can't sit. It could be because they have lots of emotional stuff going on that is distracting their brain. Which, by the way, in terms of ADD, nowadays tons of ADD. The crossover between ADD and anxiety is super complicated, and lots of different opinions about what's considered ADD and what's anxiety, and how to treat the different ones. But either way, that second shiur is basically a tzad hashava of everyone who can't be matzliach in a boxy school, which really means that you're not going to do well with any of them. At best, you'll be able to tolerate them. So best case scenario, really, it would be amazing if there were different yeshivas for those different needs. And taking ADD as an example, you could have an ADD yeshiva which has different levels of shiurim. They could all be ADD, but you could have a shiur which is incredibly high. If you had a shiur, an ADD shiur of really bright kids who had ADD, you just have to do it differently. You wouldn't be able to have a frontal lecture for an hour, which might benefit everyone. You could have you may have to break up the lecture into smaller parts. You may have to sometimes have super intense things. You may not have your schedule the same exact schedule. Also, even having an organized schedule might not be perfect. Having randomness is also helpful for the ADD kid. Where, like, here's the story, guys. You know what we're doing today? We're going. We're going to truck through this huge amount of material. Or today we're going to do the deepest stuff. I'm going to work like crazy, and we're going to go 6 hours straight on the deepest thing, and we're going to hit it, and then we're going to go skiing.
Right.
So, like, where you can, if it's catered to them, a school which doesn't put so much, the ADD kid, it's not only, he has also the executive functioning struggles, and being able to cater to him where not all of school is surrounding and is calling on his executive functioning abilities. The ADD kid doesn't have a pen for more than like 5 minutes. And we have other kids in the class have the same pen from the time they're in second grade. So if you had a school catered where they don't, it's not calling in so many of those executive functioning challenges. One where also, if you can train them with helping them compensate for some of the things that are hard for them, that would be tremendous. So coming back to your question, what are some of the things I could do? The biggest one would be to have a school catered to that. If society was to accept that, that's the biggest one. But then secondly, within the framework of within a framework of a classic school model, being able to do things different. Maybe I'm not as limited maybe I should be, but some would be limited in the sense that they'd be scared to do things differently, like teaching a classroom where you don't have the same, like nowadays, if you do certain things to kids, it must be you're a lower yeshiva. For example, if you talk to kids, if there's self-awareness, if you meet with a kid, if you spend time with a kid to help them understand themselves, like, wait, kids in high-level yeshivas, they don't need like attention from Rebbeim. Like, if you say a kid who needs attention from Rebbeim, like, that must be some kind of lower kind of yeshiva somehow. Or if you'd have not just talking to them, but if you'd have the schedule, like, for example, having activities. If you're a school with activities, oh, you're that type of yeshiva. Like real men, real yeshiva students, oh no, they don't need anything. They don't need activities. Where, like, the ADD kid, he could be a tremendous learner. He just needs to move.
Right. So that's a thing you would be nice to be able to do it, except that you have to address that kind of stigma that you need.
Right. And therapy. Therapy is a big one, which Baruch Hashem, it's been much more accepted in the world now. But therapy is a big one. That if if an ADD kid, at least he needs a rebbe, a parent who's really who's really emotionally attuned and aware and can talk him through things. But generally, really, a kid needs more, and usually a kid needs some level of working with a therapist, uh, at least to just help him monitor the bumps in the road. He's gonna the ADD kid. If you were looking at him as a car, would never he would never be that pristine car without scrapes. He's gonna have bumps. He's gonna have bruises. By definition, he's gonna have ups and downs. I just had a kid in my office yesterday who was asking. He's like really trying to be stark, and he's like, I don't get it. Why is it that I need to like go down and then go up, and then go down and then go up? Like, why can't I just stay flat, stay straight? The ADD kid is never gonna stay straight. His line. So because that's true very often, he would benefit from a therapist to help him deal with the times when he's with the downs and to deal with the bumps and the lack of awareness from others. So therapy is another huge one, which in different environments is more accepted and some is less.
What does collaboration with parents look like for you?
Okay, parents that totally depends culturally. To some parents, what I learned quickly in education, I thought that if you would explain a kid to their parents and explain, like, let's say my first parent teacher conferences, parents come in and you have some kids who are not doing well in class. So here it is. I come in and I feel like, listen, I'm going to explain to the parent that this kid, he's not just not doing well on purpose. This is why he's not doing well, because this is hard for him, or that's hard for him, or that's hard for him. And what I was shocked with is that many parents were the opposite. They didn't want to hear that. They would rather hear, don't tell me that my kid has to struggle with something. No, my kid's brilliant. My kid can do it. They're just bad. Or they're just lazy. Like they're just being bad. They just need to be. And there's definitely a whole cav of parents like that, that they have a hard, that, and I say we, it's probably true, all of us as parents, is that we have a hard time accepting limitations in our kids or challenges in our kids. So yeah, in terms of focusing specifically on ADD, there's a lot of parents who don't want to see ADD in their kids because that's somehow a limitation of their kid. Perhaps that's a reflection of themselves. So you definitely have a cav of parents that's like that. They'd rather be mad at their kid and say their kid's just not trying. You have a cav of parents who hate medicine, and they think that if the kid takes medicine, somehow I'm drugging my kid. It's going to be unhealthy for them, or probably more psychologically means there's something wrong with my kid. I can't accept that. Also, you have giving medicine as like the struggle with dealing with the appetite and dealing with some of the bumps in the road like that. That's also a frustration for some parents. And then you have some parents who are very very engaged and very attuned and monitor it closely and build up their kids, and especially as the years go, there's more and more parents that are like that. And it's I think that as much as the kid needs support and needs respect from all the parties around.
What have you found to be more effective than explaining the child to the parent?
So first of all, number one, no one listens to anything talk. We None of us listen to anyone talking about our kids if we don't think that the person talking to our kid not only loves them but respects them. I think there's a lot of talk in education now. Baruch Hashem, there's a lot of talk about the importance for Rebbe to love their Talmud. I think it doesn't have as much talk, and hopefully we'll have more talk soon. Is not only to love, it's to just love them is very good, but you need to understand them and accept them and respect them. And if you love my child but don't think very highly of them, I'm not really. That's not great. That's not good for me as a parent, and it's not good for my kid either. That's kind of, if you're like kind of a soft bigotry of low expectations, where like, I love your kid, he's amazing. You know what he did today? He made one bracha today, which
Right.
is that's good. But you really, it's really belittling,
Right.
and it's dehumanizing to just love me with my and think of me in a certain sense like very low. If that's all I'm capable of, great. But if I'm capable of more, so I have to not just love them, but also understand them and respect them and think highly and to believe in them, not because of what they could be, but because of what they are, and to see greatness in everyone where they are. So I think that's number one. That a Rebbe, that the Rebbe has to actually feel that. If we're looking at the parent coming in, I just want to get this kid off my hands and have him not disturb my class so much. It's much harder to give that over to the parent. So when if the parent knows that you actually think highly of them and believe in them and think that they could do a lot, that's the biggest thing. And then after that is to help them whatever you believe, whatever you believe about the kid, you can give over that to the parent. Parent might listen, might not listen, and they're entitled to different opinions. But if you really believe in this kid, and you really believe that this kid he has, I want to explain my version of how I understand the kid to the parent, and I really believe it, and I really think highly of them. The parents are open to that.
Are there any strategies you use for yourself these days?
I love that. So as I learned, it's interesting. I never thought of myself again in all my years in base management. I never thought of myself as ADD because like I was thriving, and and then I did then only now then once I had students and as I mentioned before and then having kids then also like realizing like I'm ADD and I remember recently saying it like a vad with a large chevra of Talmidim. We were talking about something and I said something about I said something like I'm probably ADD and the guys laughed. I'm like, guys, why are you laughing? Like, Rebbe, of course you are.
Oh, that's great.
so 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 like to really to put it into words, like I don't think I always knew that I was high energy, and I knew that my father thought I had ADD when I was in third grade. But to put into words, I don't think I probably really did that until like the past X number of years, and have since my kids are teenagers. Strategies for myself, though, I always knew, and I learned, and also Hashem created a beautiful world where lo tov v'yos adam levado. Spouses are really really helpful in self awareness and Hashem gives us. So I'm blessed with a wonderful wife who helped me and helps me understand the full range of what ADHD can help can affect us. And like the first time I remember going shopping, and here I'm going shopping for my wife, and I'm wanting to be doing something positive, and I come home with half the list. And, and my wife's like, I don't get it. Or I'll go shopping and I have three things on my list and then I'm shopping and I see something that I know my wife would want, and I get that, and I come home with three things on the list. I knew there were three things. I came home with three.
Right.
Unfortunately, I only have one of the things she sent me to get because two of the other things. So like that, I had to like realize like, okay, there's something going on here, but I mean to do well. Like why is this happening? Or things like just forgetting. Now, I was always built time. I didn't have a problem with. I'm actually really good with time, and always was really good with time. But like being forgetful of important things and like the things that aren't in front of me, just not. So I had to like, what's the deal with that? So strategies I had to learn, like techniques for that. If I'm going shopping, I'm writing every single thing down on a list. If I have an important thing, everything's in my calendar and I have a count and I'm scheduling my day perfectly. If I, as a Rebbe, as an administrator, so first of all, I think ADD has helped me tremendously as an administrator and helped me juggle. I have 222 kids that tell me them in high school, and so this is new. I'm new this year to this new school, but I think last year when 170 in high school, I believe that I was holding in 170 lives. And I think ADD helps me do that, being able to bounce around the middle, to juggle a lot of balls in that certain way. I have 222 kids in high school now, and I'm just new to it, and I'm getting there. I'm on my way to getting to that. So it's very very helpful as an educator, even as an administrator. However, my limitations is that I've been blessed with having wonderful scan menahels in St. Louis and in Brooklyn and now in Heichal. I have wonderful teams, and I had to learn how to work together with teammates who had strengths that could cover for areas that I'm not as strong at. Really, I had to learn details and systems. I'm learning how to anything which is very systematic. I can run tremendously, but it has to be systematic. If I need to be on top of how kids are doing. I need to have a system of how I'm going to be on top of. I'm not talking about as people. As people, I see them, and that my heart can connect with, my brain can connect with. But systems to make sure that I know what's going on in 15 Ian Sure, that I know what's going on in 45 Kodesh classes, that I know what's going on in the English department. I know what's going on with that. I'm on top of attendance, so I can rely on my natural like concentration and focus, but I'm going to drop a lot of balls. So I've learned that I've had to create real systems and rely on systems, and also had to learn how to work with people whose strengths are those things.
Do you ever hear people say ADHD is quote unquote not real? When you do, how do you react?
Sure. The number one thing is I laugh, but it depends. That doesn't always work depending on I either laugh on the inside or the outside depending on what's socially acceptable at that moment. But I understand it because, and listen, it's on a bigger discussion. All of psychology is the type of thing where some people, and if you don't see it, some people, it's like explaining 3D to somebody who's 2D. It's a world of unseen. So you're understanding it and you're living it and you really feel it, so then it's very hard to believe that it exists, that it's real. And symptoms, like for example, I believe when someone tells me a kid doesn't care, that's an easy thing for people to see. I see that he doesn't care. To me, I don't really believe that about almost anyone, that there's such a thing as a kid doesn't care. I think we're born, we have our neshamas are on fire. We're craving eternity. We're built to crave a connection with Hashem. We're built to create, to crave success in life. I think we all care. There's reasons why being lazy is a symptom. It's not a cause. As an example, like the Shari Kedusha of Chaim Vital writes that Atzlus is a derivative, comes out of Atzvus. That Atzvus causes Atzlus. Atzlus is not purely natural. Being lazy is a result of Atzvus, as the Torah of Ram and the Leket Sichas Musar both point out. Isaac Sher and the Torah and Rav Grudzinski from Slobodka, they both point out, if you look at kids, there's no laziness in kids. A kid has two gears, on and sleeping. And we only see laziness as we get older, and really that comes from, according to Shar Kedusha, it would be the pshat, because it only comes from when we bang into limitations, and then we feel like I can't, and we feel despondent. So when someone who says that ADHD is not real, I get it. What they're seeing is the external. They're seeing the klipa, they're seeing the shell, they're seeing that the person doesn't care, but they're not seeing deep the core, the drive behind it, and what's happening, what's causing that to happen. So it depends. If it's someone who it doesn't make a difference, you move on. But if it's someone who's important, if it's a parent of a child that you're working with, I guess you have to work slowly with it, and you have to point out like the inconsistencies, and then have them ask the questions. In other words, to point out the inconsistencies. That often people who are naysayers will point out the inconsistencies. They'll see something negative, like, look, this kid, you think he's really, really this? Look, then how come he's doing this? An example, I had a student call me up 3 weeks into the first year of base medrash, and he calls me up, and I said, "Oh, how's yeshiva doing?" So he says, "Oh, yeshiva's great. Shir's great. My chavrusos are great." So he's like, "But Rebbe, there's one thing. It's all fake." So what do you mean? He said, "For 3 weeks, I learned shtark. I was at every seder. I learned shtark. I just had an off day because it's an out Shabbos. I just had a day off. I didn't wake up for shachris. I didn't do anything. So it must be it's all fake." So I said to him, I said, "How do you know? Maybe the first 3 weeks was all real, and today is fake." So I said, "What's really pshat? They're both real. The inconsistency, they're both real. Now let's figure out what is it that caused. Why is it that when you have structure, when you have so creating those kashas is a beginning. Like often naysayers will see the negative and they'll have the kasha. They'll say, "Oh, you think you're stark? You think that my kid's stark? You think this is good? Then how come he's doing this?" So I like to just to create the kasha the other way. Like when you say he's lazy, you say he doesn't care. But you know what? Look, he did care here, and he did take care here. So he does care. So let's figure out why he. Also, if you put it in their best interest, as an example, a kid comes in and he's not doing well in school. If a kid comes into the office, so if he tells me, if it's in his best interest to understand himself, that's always helpful. In other words, he comes into the office, he comes in and he's not doing well. So like, why are you not doing well? So if he says, "Well, I don't care," that's not going to go well, right? If there's a school with structure, but if he says, "Well, it's hard," so then there's something to work with. It's hard. Okay, let's figure it out. What's hard, and let's figure it out if there's something we can do for you. So that creating that it's in his best interest to understand himself, creating that safe environment where it's okay to say that it's hard, will enable him to get there.
Right. Wow. Okay, what's a message of hope you want to leave our listeners with today, and anything else you wanted to say?
The message of hope is, I think, specifically in terms of ADD, I think that Hashem in His kindness has created us all different, and has created us with each of us with tremendous abilities, and we live in a world where where sometimes certain qualities are easier they relate better with the specific environment that we're created in, like school, and certain things are certain qualities are easier to make the most of. But all of us have tremendous abilities and tremendous qualities. And Chazal tell us, it was an amazing Sforno, and I do it in a quick moment, is that the Sforno says in Parshas Baloscha, he explains the whole story of Moshe Rabbeinu and why Moshe said to Hashem that why he wanted to die at that point to take me out. And he basically explains, make the whole thing in a short thing, is that Moshe was frustrated. He was feeling that he couldn't help Klal Yisrael in one aspect, is that he couldn't have them believe that he loved them despite and because of their differences. And he said the only hope that somebody can reach, can have that, is if they're more closely related, and therefore be better to have representation from each shevet who are closer to them. And yeah, if you can't do that, because it would be pagam in my covet, it would be kedai for me not to be alive in order that they could be. In other words, it's worth having leaders of much less quality if they're leaders who can help the people believe in themselves. And Moshe Rabbeinu, he killed himself a Klal Yisrael. He literally went to heaven and back for us. He brought the Torah from Shemayim. He split the sea. He did everything for us. He loved us. He davened. He saved us from Hashem he saved us from our Averos many times. But if there's a little bit of a lack of belief in my unique abilities, so that's rough. And we need is the most important quality in leadership is somebody who can help, not just give a good shiur and not just be the biggest tzaddik, but someone who can help the kids, talmidim, believe in themselves, in their unique qualities. And Hashem gave us tremendous abilities. And honestly, in terms of ADD, if you look, many of our great, as mentioned before, many of our great rebbeim and influencers, if you allow ourselves to look at them and to study, they probably have ADD. And you look at some of their qualities. So the hope would be for that kid who's sitting there struggling. There's a world out there that the ADD kid who, and for sure, and outside of learning, in business, the world is full, like every great businessman. For sure, the people without ADD work for the people with ADD. So there's a lot, and that's not just we're in the world of business, but also in the world of Torah. And it's not just that we can't be successful academically. We can be tremendously successful academically. We just have to do it in a fashion that works for us.
Okay, amazing. Rabbi Goldman, this has been fantastic.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much for all the work that you do. It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure and a schus to know that you're out there and helping kids like this.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the ADHD Heroes podcast. For questions about the podcast, you can email us at adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. Also, for sponsorships or to share your story, your ADHD story, you can also email us at the same place, adhdheroespodcast@gmail.com. To be in touch with me about ADHD coaching, writing, or speaking engagements, you can email me at rsreichadhdcoach@gmail.com. Be sure to check out my website, rsreich.com, adhdcoach.com. You can follow me on LinkedIn, or you can check out my blog on nefesh.org. Check out my blog there under my name. Important disclaimer: podcasts are great, but they do not take the place of mental health help or medical help. So if you need help with mental health or need a doctor, be sure to be in contact with some of them. Please, if you like this show, please rate, review, and share with a friend. That's how these things get out there. Thank you again for listening, and thank you to our producers at Pretty Easy Podcasts.